Yep, my name is Jonathan Saville. I am the Director of Audiences and Programming at the Theatre Royal and Royal Concert Hall in Nottingham. I'm married with, or before lockdown I was married with 3 children, with one very imminently on the way. I guess, yeah, watching the news, seeing things coming in kind of January time. I guess it hit home a little bit more in early February when Sarah, my wife, was taken very ill. She was kind of 7 months pregnant, and she was ill for 4 weeks, and we're pretty much convinced that she had COVID. She had sore throat. She couldn't get out of bed. So for 4 weeks, the final 4 weeks almost before she was due to give birth, she was not well at all, and I had some symptoms, but they were fairly mild compared with what Sarah had. So I guess it kind of hit home and was a bit more, we were a bit more conscious there. But obviously in the environment that I work in, it was, if and when this is going to happen, the planning. So our planning started taking place end of February in terms of what we would do or how we could manage this process as well. So it became fairly serious from February onwards as far as I was concerned. We got a half closure notice from Boris Johnson on the Monday, the week before the actual lockdown. So he suggested that people shouldn't visit theatres, didn't tell people not to, kind of left it to us, took no responsibility, and therefore we'd got a show on that night, which we continued to do. We then obviously, on the advice of UK Theatre and other governing bodies, closed the venue down on that Tuesday morning. So we've had no shows since the 17th of March in the venue.
What was it like then on that last night when you still had a show? I mean, did people still turn up?
Yes, they did. They turned up in really significant numbers. It was Riverdance. They turned up in significant numbers. It was one of those. So I came home. I came home, picked my son up from school, and came back here. And then I got a phone call from the opera company who were in the theatre the next day to discuss. I probably spent 2 hours on the phone to them discussing whether we cancelled, whether we didn't cancel, and other people were talking to the Riverdance company to see whether they wanted to cancel or didn't want to cancel. And this was at 6 o'clock in the evening, and the show was 7:30. It was 90 minutes before the show was supposed to happen, so it was very difficult to cancel at that point, because you're going to have to try and get hold of almost 2,500 people in order to tell them that the show wasn't happening. So the decision was taken to do that show, and then obviously everything was cancelled from that point onwards. Yeah, I was supposed to be leaving the venue at the end of April and going to a new venue to start to be a venue director at another venue. So yeah, it was one of those things. It was all it was all sorted. I'd signed contracts, they'd signed contracts. I'd handed my resignation in, and then on the Wednesday after lockdown, I got an email to say, can you give me a call? I rang them and they said, plans have changed. They were supposed to be taking over another venue. They clearly weren't going to do that in that situation, and so I was told that there wasn't a job for me, which was scary, worrying, frustrating, upsetting. We were due to have another baby in the next couple of weeks, and I faced the prospect then of being unemployed within 6 weeks. So it wasn't a great situation. There was some to and fro at the venue initially that I wasn't given my job back straight away. I had to fight for that. I had probably 5 or 6 sleepless nights, literally sleepless nights. Didn't sleep for almost a week. Until the director that I worked with for a long time agreed that I could go back and could have my job back. So it was a really challenging, upsetting, frustrating time, not just for me. Subsequently I found out that my dad hadn't slept for a week because he was so worried about the situation. Sarah was due to give birth any time then, so there was obviously a lot of stress, and actually within 36 hours of finding out that I had got my job back, Sarah gave birth. So it was obviously a stressful period for the whole family.
In the same household. I mean, it must have just been an absolutely bonkers time.
It was, and because of the technical requirements for us to continue to work, but work at home, I had no paternity leave. I was working 10-hour days in order to try and sort out rescheduling of shows, cancellation of shows. The biggest thing that we were having to deal with was the public wanting the money back. And some people were very good about it, some people weren't very good about it, and generally seemed to think that all we were doing was sitting around doing nothing. So that was difficult to deal with from a managing a team point of view, because they were getting a lot of grief from people who didn't really seem to understand the situation, or chose not to understand the situation and just saw the fact that they wanted their money back. So it was an interesting time, but actually what it did do for me and a work point of view was to solidify the amazing work that my team do, and the way they pulled together, the way they drew on kind of their own experiences and expertise and knowledge and understanding in order to deliver, you know, an at-home service on something that we'd never even imagined that we would need to do probably 4 weeks before. So yeah, from that point of view, it was fantastic to see people that I'd worked with kind of develop their skills and really stretch themselves and take themselves beyond their comfort zone time and time again in order to make sure that we could deliver these refunds to people, and we could do it in an organised and strategic fashion. But it was hard work, and it was taxing and tiring and mentally exhausting. And you know, certainly. Probably after 2 or 3 months of doing that continuously, because that's what we were doing, you know, people started to drop a little bit. So we had to make sure that we gave people a bit of a break, and we furloughed some staff in order to make sure that we could, you know, we could do that. But yeah, it was hard work, and it was certainly, you learned a lot about the people you worked around, and I'm really proud of the team, the way they worked in that period. We probably bent the rules a little bit in terms of asking my sister to come and stay so that she could look after Rose when Sarah went into labour. But yeah, we turned up at the hospital. It was all seemed quite tranquil. I mean, we got there fairly early in the morning. It was fairly tranquil. It didn't appear to be a mad panic around. The maternity ward seemed to be functioning as it had done the previous time when Rose was born. So it didn't feel completely different. Obviously, you know, there wasn't the facilities that Sarah wanted to use. We couldn't go into the sanctuary, but yeah, it for me, as the partner, it felt reasonably normal up to and giving the birth. It was obviously after the birth when I was asked to leave that became slightly different from what we'd experienced the first time with Rose. Sarah's mum was isolating, so that I don't think we saw her until probably the end of May. In terms of her seeing Eva. My dad was 80 in the middle of May, so we went over there and sat in the garden, so they saw her for the first time then. But it was difficult, you know. I mean, you know, in a way, we were, you know, every other day we were talking to grandparents or parents on the phone, so we were FaceTiming them or WhatsApping them. So we, you know, they saw her, but they obviously, I don't think either grandmas actually held Eva till she was probably 3 months old, which, you know, was their choice as much as our choice, because they didn't want to give her anything or get anything from her. But yeah, very strange, and I think it was much more difficult for Sarah than it was for me, because I was just working 9 till 6 every day and then coming down. Sarah was obviously looking after 2 children because Rose wasn't at nursery, so I mean, she was a super mum as far as I was concerned in that period.
There's a bit about that.
Yeah, Rose liked to appear on some of my Zoom and Teams calls, so she would either stand behind me and take my headphones out of my ears whilst I was in a Zoom meeting with 30 other people, or she would walk into the room and just sit on my knee whilst I was on a Teams meeting and shout things at the screen and then walk off again as if it was the most normal thing in the world. So she's nothing if not entertaining. We've established that her career path is to be a clown when she grows up. So we're looking forward to that. I'm not quite sure how that's going to work out, but that's influenced with watching Dumbo about 50 million times, though, to be fair. So.
The sort of gigs and theatre is one of the biggest unknowns at the moment, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. We've no idea realistically when we can be back. I mean, hopefully it'll be sometime in the new year. I suspect we won't be back having shows, or we won't be back having shows as we know it. This year we may do some screenings, we may do some other shows which are socially distanced, but you know, as a venue like ours, which receives no public subsidy, there is no financial financially it's just unviable to have an audience that's less than 75%, and social distancing roughly 25 to 30% of the seats you could use, so it just becomes completely unviable. So there are other things that we're investigating and looking at, but realistically, unless we get government support on that, you just can't continue, or you just wouldn't be able to start doing stuff at that sort of level that was going to cost significant amounts of money. And that's the other thing. I don't think people actually realise or understand how much money goes into making these shows on the stage. People talk about ticket prices being expensive, but that's the cost of putting that show on the stage. So there's that, and then there's will people come back in great enough numbers to justify the shows going in? I'm interested to see, once we get back into the swing of things, probably in the middle part of next year, how many audience members are willing to come back in. There will be some shows where they'll do that because it's a very, it's something like everyone's talking about Jamie or Six, where people are desperate to see it and it's been cancelled or it's been postponed a couple of times. But there'll be other shows where we haven't sold tickets for it yet, and you wonder what the level of attendance will be on that. So we really are stepping into the unknown, once we get back into the swing of things.
For being born, ordinarily you'd have had paternity leave, then you'd have been out at work every day. Do you feel like you've been able to spend more time with her? Has that been a nice thing for you to be at home for that, or has it felt frustrating that you've had to work from home and not been able to spend time with her, if that makes sense as a question?
Yeah, I think it's 50-50, I guess. I'm not a great worker from home. I'd quite like to do it maybe once a week, but 5 days a week with all the distractions that are going on, you can hear the DVDs being played down here, you hear the shouting, the screaming, the crying, the walking downstairs to get something to eat or to drink. I'm not a great home worker, if I'm honest. But yeah, it has meant that Sarah would often leave Eva on the bed asleep next to me when I was working, because that was the safe place to avoid a sister's evil clutches. But so you do get time to spend with her. You do get time to bond with her more. And had I gone away at the end of April, clearly that would have been even less time to bond. So there's definitely been some benefits in my relationship with Eva and Rose to an extent as well in what's happened, because that's meant that I have been at home more. They have seen me more. But yeah, it's been hard work as well. And I guess because the office is set up and it's there, and I'm fairly diligent, that sort of stuff. I would go and do some work in the evening. So when Eva was just born, I would work in the morning, have the afternoon off, and then go back and work till 10 o'clock in the evening. So I was still doing my kind of 8 to 10 hours every day, but I was still having taking some time to look after Rose, so that Sarah had some space with Eva. So it was kind of just stretching the whole day out. So you'd get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and do 5 or 6 hours then, and then you'd have the afternoon off, and then you'd go back after 8 o'clock and do another 3 or 4 hours then as well. So yeah, it made it hard work, but actually, yeah, it's been rewarding, because Eva's so happy and contented, and I guess that maybe is part of the fact that she's been at home and she's had both parents at home looking after her and caring for her.